Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Winterbottom with GMDC, and I want to welcome all of you to today's live videocast, which is actually the 11th such presentation in our GMDC Connect videocast series. We're especially excited to be able to bring you today's presentation, which is entitled The New General Merchandise Hierarchy. I say excited because it's really no secret that something really important has been missing in the GM industry for quite a long time now, and that missing component has been a common framework, a common reference point. Because without such a common framework, it's historically been very challenging at best to effectively analyze or benchmark performance within all of the GM categories. However, now, through a very successful collaboration with Nielsen over the last couple of years, we've been able to successfully jointly develop such a framework. And not only that, but as of the first week of March, just 3 weeks ago, that framework and all of the interpretive analysis around that framework is now freely available to all members of GMDC on the website MyGMDC. To help you learn more about this valuable new resource to benchmark your business, we're lucky to have with us today Nielsen's Senior Vice President of Custom Analytics, Mr. Stuart Taylor. However, before handing things over to Stuart, I want to touch on a couple things. I want to give everybody a heads up that Stuart will be taking a Q&A session at the end of this presentation. So if you'd like to contribute any questions to that session, use the chat window directly underneath the screen in which you're watching this video cast. We'll be monitoring that, and we'll pass them off to Stuart at the end of his talk. With that, please allow me to introduce Mr. Stuart Taylor, Senior Vice President of Custom Analytics at Nielsen. Welcome, Stuart.
Thanks a lot, Mike, and thank you everybody for taking a little bit of time today to join us and basically going to go through an overview of the Nielsen GMDC hierarchy. There's a lot of excitement here, both from Nielsen's point of view, obviously from the GMDC, hopefully with everybody on the phone. We've been talking about this for a long time. It has been a few years in the coming, along those lines, it's an ambitious project, but the journey's paid off. So ambitious in what sense? Well, we had to pull together a common view of general merch, and there's kind of a joke in talking about this. That's why they call it general, right? Because it's not a standardized group of products or departments. But in order to really understand general merchandise, you do need that standardized view, and it's been really hard to create because of so many intricacies on product coding and views across different retailers and such. But that's been done, and the hierarchy is built a while back, and we've been working on it in terms of populating it with data. And the idea is to not just give you a standardized view of a hierarchy now, but now we wanted to start to give you some insights related to that. And so, as Mike mentioned earlier this month, the first week of March, all the standardized reports off of the hierarchy for the food and drug channels have been posted on MyGMDC. We'll take a look at that, walk you through some other resources available to you there, and hopefully acquaint you with accessibility and how you can start thinking about using the content. So again, I'll talk a little bit more about the hierarchy and the application of the hierarchy, just so we're all sort of clear on what that means, and then spend some time on MyGMDC, showing you logon procedures, showing you where the documents are. But then we'll take a little bit of a turn toward the end and just talk about what you can do with the data overall. So you've got, as a GMDC member, you have a excellent benefit here in the access to the reports that are put out there. There's more you can do, and that's actually something we look forward to with the membership, in terms of we would love to start working with you and helping you out on retailer collaboration projects, so that manufacturers, suppliers, retailers can start to get some more value out of this, drive some growth in the department in various categories. So just show you just a couple slides as some examples there. And then, as Mike said, hopefully there's some time for Q&A toward the end of the presentation. So jumping in, what is a hierarchy? We talk about the Nielsen GMDC hierarchy, GMDC Nielsen hierarchy, and it is actually a trademark name. A hierarchy is just a structured view of data. We've all seen org charts and other representations of a hierarchy, but it's showing multiple levels of information or classification and how things reside in those levels. And so the GMDC hierarchy here, it's a 3-level hierarchy. And so level 1 is sort of the major category breaks within general merch like baby, home, kitchen, candy, pet, etc. We'll show you some more detail on that. And then below that, you have levels of detail within baby. Uh, level 2, and then there's actually another level below that. So for example, this is showing you a sample of the 3 levels within kitchen, and it's not the total kitchen hierarchy, just a sample. So category or level 1 is kitchen, and then level 2, you can see we've got bakeware, cookware, etc., countertop, pantry. And then level 3 within bakeware, you have foil bakeware, metal bakeware, glass bakeware, etc. So it's the structuring of the data into a common view so that when we're talking about kitchen and we're talking about bakeware, we all know what we're talking about. We all know what the view is. And so it's the common definition so that we're speaking a common language. Here's the pet level 1 within the GMDC hierarchy. You can see animal feed, aquatic, pet, bird food, and accessories, down through cat food, cat litter. It's got dog food, etc. And then, if you look at cat food, you have canned, dry, and cat treats. And so it's a very structured view of the pet department within general merch. And so that's what a hierarchy is. It's very simple. It's how we structure all the UPC codes in a store and how they roll up into these views, into the GMDC Nielsen GM hierarchy. Now, a hierarchy is great because it does create that common language. It does create that common view into the conversation about general merch. But it's really just a starting point. It's an important starting point, but what are you going to use it for? It's nice to know that wet cat food resides below the cat food section within the pet department of general merch, but that's just sort of knowledge in terms of the structure. You really want to know, what does that mean to me? If I'm a supplier in pet, how can I use this to help grow total pet or to help grow my categories? And so we need to turn that structure into insights. The way we do that, and obviously it's a Nielsen point of view, is populate it with UPC coding so that we can then track sales of all the different items within cat treats or within foil bakeware. And so that we can have that roll up and understand market share, or share of bakeware that is foil versus glass versus metal, or share of general merch that is home versus pet versus candy. And so start to look at relative sales levels. And so right here on this page, it just talks about some of the various sort of high-level insights that we're trying to deliver through these standardized reports that are available at MyGMDC. So the size and share of general merch overall, and the various categories and subcategories. Which categories are growing or declining? And I'll be honest, as we got into this project, that was probably one of the bigger ahas for me, is understanding, and we'll show you kind of and maybe some of you have seen already, an analysis that we did on leaders versus laggards in general merch, and we'll get into some of those definitions in this discussion today. But the leaders appear to be finding growth trends within general merch and capitalizing on those sooner than the laggards. And so they're sort of balancing their efforts where they make the most sense. And it seems like such a simple concept, but it makes such a big difference in market in terms of driving not just general merch sales, but frankly driving total store sales. What is GM's share of total store distribution? If you look at just the average number of items carried, how big is GM? How does that vary by category? In other words, how are stores kind of resourcing their GM sections by allocating UPCs across the various categories? What are the characteristics of retailers who are doing well in GM versus those that aren't doing so well? And so there's some reports out there that are interesting in those regards. And then are there opportunities we're not capitalizing on? And so, if you're a retailer and there's major growth in a certain section of general merch that you're seeing in the broader marketplace, is there a reason why you're not seeing that within your own walls? And so it's this idea of answering important business questions around general merch that we're really wanting to get to through delivering this hierarchy. And so we're pleased to make it available to you, and we're really interested to get your feedback, frankly, as you start to get into the resources. So let's actually take a look at the website. And so it's, in case you're taking notes, my.gmdc.org. And we'll just actually follow a live hyperlink onto the website, and I'll show you the login process, how to access reports and stuff. So obviously I'll be working on the computer. Hopefully everything goes smoothly as we go through this demo. So when you come into MyGMDC, it's a simple log on, and actually I found that it'll keep you logged on. It'll remember you once you've logged on the first time if you haven't already. That log on brings you to this landing screen, and what you want to do is go to the My Service Center, where various information resources are available to you. So clicking on that, and it brings you to the Service Center, and you can see there are multiple assets available here. Obviously, the one that we're interested in is the GMDC Nielsen GM hierarchy. And so if I just click Go there, it brings you to the landing page. And so there's a lot of information on this first page that, so I want to walk through that a little bit before we get into any details. Obviously, there's the welcome screen, that talks about the effort and building the hierarchy. But then I want to get into some of these sections down below that'll help you. You know, if you're not familiar with the content or the project, the GMDC has done a lot of work to try to make bring a lot of information to the forefront just on this landing page. So there is an FAQ document, and it's a standard FAQ document. It's a text document. It goes through. You can see the questions that are listed here. How the GM hierarchy can improve your business, what data, information in the reports, etc. So if you download that file, it'll go through all these questions, gives you a lot of background on the development of the hierarchy, and just some standard Q&A that we have observed in our conversation with the GMDC and with the membership. And then the section on how do I understand the data. And I'm actually going to show you an example of that, but it's a file where we brought down examples of all the various reports that are available to you on the website. And it's a text documentation, so it shows a picture of the report, tells you what the measures are and defines those, and then gives you an example of how you might use that. So we'll spend more time on that, going through that later in this discussion. And then as we page down a little further, how do I find certain data in the hierarchy? And I think you might find this is an interesting document because it gives you the full detail of the hierarchy. All the level 1s, within that, all the level 2s, and then within that, all the level 3s. And so if you want to explore the hierarchy, I would encourage you to pull down this document and take a look at the various levels and understand that, because again, as we're wanting to start talking in a common language using this hierarchy, this is a document that really is the dictionary, so to speak, for that language. You'll notice too, as you go through that document, that there will be lists within it at various, for each level, it tells you which reports are available on the GMDC website. Before I go in and actually show you sort of how to navigate and selecting reports, I do want to point out this additional questions line here. And so if you do have, as you're getting into looking at the data, if you're having troubles navigating or finding anything, the first point of contact is either a phone call to GMDC, you can see the phone number here, or an email at info@gmdc.org. And so that in all sort of first levels of query should go to that phone number. And then we have an escalation process in place depending on what, if we can't answer the question right away, and it's something detailed about the data or the contents, it might escalate you over toward Nielsen. If you have questions about how to access custom data or other views of the data, a different part of Nielsen, but we have plans in place or policies in place in terms of how to direct you to make sure you're getting your answer and able to get the information you need. So why don't we jump in, and I'll just show you quickly how to navigate. It's if you're familiar with using Windows folders, you're familiar with how to navigate and find the reports. So again, you recall I mentioned another document that shows the hierarchy, all the level 1s, level 2s, level 3s. You can use that to help find what you're looking for. Chances are, if you're a supplier and you work in certain categories, you could probably find what you're looking for just through clicking through these windows. So let's say I am in the, I make products in the home category or department, which is home is level 1. You can see you click on home and it brings you to home level 1 reports, home level 2. And so what that means is for a level 1 report, and again, we'll show you an example, it gives you general data for home in total, but then also for the components of home from a level 2 perspective. Why don't we just pull one up real quick and show you what I mean. Oops, clicking on the wrong thing there. So now I've got, I click on home level 1 reports, and then you can see I've got channel detail, performance metrics. I've got channel performance or level 1 channel performance metrics. And again, there's a library that explains what these different reports are, and I'll show you some of them. Report on seasonality. I'll just pull up one of these real quick. And we're not going to go through detail on this, but you can see it's all the reports have a standard format like what we're looking at here. And so we've got total US, all that's combined on line 1, and then for food, total home, and then all of the level 2s within home. Same thing for drugs. So we'll come back to this when I show you more details on how to access these reports. So I'm coming back online. Now, a nice thing about the structure as well is if we want to leave, shoot, can't go off the report now. As you're looking at the reports, but as you want to navigate through the hierarchy, you just go back to the selection screen and click the first line that takes you back to the level above. So that takes you back to the prior menu, and ultimately can take you back to the first level of the menu. So let me. There you go. Thanks, Ann. I have to remember that I'm using somebody else's computer here. So like I was saying, you can go up a level and it takes you back to home level 1, level 2, or I can go back up a level and that takes me back to the first page of navigating the hierarchy. And so these are all the level 1s. And so you would just do the same thing as if you want to navigate through outdoor or pet, etc. So why don't we, I'll go back in and show you some detail on a couple of these reports, just to tell you about the annotated notes document that I mentioned. So if you go back to MyGMDC and you download the annotated notes file, it goes through every single report, or at least examples of every single report for, I think it's baby. But it's a very detailed description of what's in the reports. And so here is, if I pull it down, this is, in fact, we were just looking at this report for home, but this is channel detail performance metrics. And so this would be the first page of the annotated notes document that you'd see. The next page actually then starts to go into specific definitions. And so in the upper left there, you can see the channel definitions are circled. And the first one says XAOC. So what is XAOC? And that's it's a Nielsen terminology for extended all outlets combined. And so it's extended in that for a long time we defined all outlets combined as food, drug, and mass. But now we've expanded that to include all of our dollar retailers and all of it's got Sam's Club and it's got the Defense Commissary. So all of our census level offerings across all channels is the extended all outlets combined. And then most of the reports then, so all outlets combined, just technicality, it shows detail for level 1 only, but there are various reasons why there's no detail for the XAOC or extended all outlets combined below level 1, and that's something that we could talk about later if you're interested. But what we do have detail for all the reports is within the food and the drug channels. So as you look again at the at the slide, the channel definition for food is the grocery class of trade, and drug is the drug class of trade. So there's probably no real new information there. And just keep in mind, all channels are projected to the total US. And then the next page goes into all the metrics. And again, probably most of these metrics are very familiar with you. Sales dollars equals total dollar sales for the 52-week period. And by the way, the data is run through October 28th of 2013. Share of L1 sales dollars means that as you look down into the level 2 data, and I'll sort of, so total level 1 is this first row here. These are the share of level 1 dollars then. These are the level 2s going down. That would be what is that level 2 share of the level 1 parent overall. The annual sales trend is the dollar% change versus year ago. Average selling price is simply dollars divided by units, so dollars per unit. The 4-week UPC count. So that is a measure, sometimes we call it average number of items, but it's looking at the last 4 weeks of the data series. And it's saying, in food or in drug, what are the average number of items that we tend to see on the shelf in a given store? So it uses a concept called ACV weighting, or it weights by store size, in order to estimate the typical number of items we'd expect to see. And that's important to know, how retailers are merchandising these various categories, how they're allocating space. And it's not a space measure per se, it's counting items. But there's obviously a linkage or a correlation between items and space. And so with that UPC count, we can calculate other measures. And so we put in these reports the share of the level 1 UPCs. So in the baby aisle, what is the share of baby UPCs for baby feeding versus baby furniture and clothing, that kind of thing. And then finally is the average 4-week ACV. And so that shows in the total food channel or the drug channel, what percent of the ACV, or you can simplify it to think about it in terms of what percent of the stores are carrying the product that you're looking at. And for general merch, it's going to be 100% of ACV, right? All the stores carry it. But as you get down into some of these L2s and L3s, you're going to find a lot of variation. In fact, you can just see in the background here, there's some single-digit numbers down at the bottom, but there's some 100% up at the top. And so that's very interesting to see in general, just in terms of, hey, some retailers are carrying these products and driving sales. Obviously, others aren't. Is there a reason why? And is that an opportunity for us to consider that as a category for us to sell? So again, the annotated reports deck goes through the definitions, and then there's a slide that just says, talks about a sample interpretation. And so, the baby aisle, in all outlets combined, if we look up on this first line, is $17.8 billion, pretty big business, but it's trending down slightly at minus 0.3%. In the total U.S. food channel, baby is a $4.4 billion business, so it's about a quarter of the all outlets combined. And it's trending down 1.3%. So food is not doing as well as all outlets combined. The category, though, is growing in drug. If we look further down the page into the section where drug is down here, at 2.2%. So drug is doing well in baby in terms of driving dollar sales. In the food channel, baby feeding is the largest category. Probably not a surprise if you think about the various subcategories within baby. But it's 2/3 of total baby sales, and sales are flat. And interestingly, though, in the drug class of trade, baby feeding is the second largest category, with only 31% of total sales. So there's a real difference between the two channels in terms of how much of the sales are being driven by each of the categories. And again, that might point to opportunities. Maybe food's overdeveloped in feeding and could raise the bar some in some of these other categories. Baby feeding has an average price per unit of $3.75, and keep in mind that includes food and formula. So it's a higher number than you might think. That's the reason why. And then if you think about, so again, baby feeding is 2/3 of the dollar sales in the food channel. but it's only 55% of the items found in the food channel. And oftentimes you'll see a fair share metric, which is comparing the share of sales versus share of items. And there's a simple argument to be made that those should be at about an index of 100. So the dollar and the item share should be about approximately the same. That's not really a perfect rule to live by, but if you're just looking at sort of high level insights and you want to understand where certain categories might be quote unquote over or under skewed, that's a simple metric to be looking at. And that metric does appear in some of the reports. Here's another sample report, and I think there's around, I don't remember how many total reports there are. I think there's half a dozen of them. So I'm only showing you two in the samples today. But this report is called Leaders and Laggards, and showing basic performance metrics. And so again, just like the channel performance that we showed on the prior section, as you go through the annotated notes document, this is the live document, and so the first, it starts to get into explanations, and this one's kind of an important one in that we did an analysis with GMDC and with Radian, looking at how do you classify these leaders and laggards, and what kind of insights can you get out of that. And so this page gives you the definitions for the different quadrants. So quadrant 1 is retailers that have growth in both general merchandise and total store sales. But in quadrant 1, general merchandise is growing faster than total store. And so these retailers are really doing well overall, and they're doing particularly well in general merch. Quadrant 2, similarly, it's retailers that are both growing in total sales and in general merch. But in quadrant 2, total store sales are outpacing general merchandise sales growth rates. So quadrants 1 and 2, just think in terms of growth, the difference is that quadrant 1 is doing better in general merch on an overall basis. Quadrant 2 is doing better in total store. Quadrant 3 is mixed results. It's where either general merch is growing and total store is not, or it's where total store is growing and general merch is not, if I said that right. And then quadrant 4 is where, unfortunately, both GM and total store trends are negative. And so that was the quadrant analysis. The idea here then is trying to find out what are the characteristics of the retailers who are doing really well, who are growing both general merchandise and total store sales, and are there things we can learn from that in terms of the how they're developed on a as we talked about on a prior page, average numbers of UPC basis, sort of development indices in items versus sales, different categories that are driving growth, et cetera. And so that's the idea of the quadrant analysis for the leaders and laggards. Again, goes through a couple pages looking at definitions. And so you can see on the left where these key metrics are, sales per store. And so that's taking total retailer dollar sales, dividing by the number of stores in the chain. And so it's an average on a sales per store basis that's what we use for classifying the quadrants. The 2012 to 2013 sales growth is the average percent growth in dollar sales for the retailers in that quadrant. The UPCs per retailer shows the average, again, for the group of retailers in each of the quadrants. What are the how many items do they carry on average for each of the levels of the hierarchy? And then what is the trend on the UPCs? Are they carrying more UPCs this year than they were last year, or are they carrying less? And so what's the overall trend in terms of how the retailers are merchandising these various general merch categories? And then sales per UPC per store. And so it's a per store velocity metric that kind of shows overall development. And so that's what's on the left side here in terms of the data. And then the right side shows the actual quadrant chart. And there's two dimensions in this chart. On the vertical axis is sales growth. And so remember, sales growth was the key determinant in terms of creating the quadrants themselves. And then we plotted UPC growth on the horizontal axis, thinking that it would be interesting to see, is there a correlation between how we're driving more merchandising, more items selling in general merch, and how that might be correlated to dollar sales. And if you're looking in the background, you can see that the quadrant 1, the best, actually is exceeding both on a sales growth and on UPC growth for general merch in total. Quadrant 2 is up there very close to it. But then as we get into quadrants 3 and 4, they're actually declining sales on average, because remember, we're looking at on averages here. And they're also declining on UPC count. And so, an insight there might be that the retailers who are investing or protecting the general merch department and potentially investing and growing it, they appear to be doing better overall. That's a pretty blunt statement off of one slide. You'd probably want to dig down more into that. But that's what this does show, that as we've said all along, general merch matters, and it appears as though if you're investing in it, it's not just good for general merch, but it appears to be good for the total store in terms of driving, delivering against the breadth of consumer needs when the shoppers are in your store. So again, this is the sample interpretation slide. So quadrants 1 and 2 both show sales and UPC growth in baby, as opposed to the declines seen in quadrants 3 and 4, which we've already talked to. They also are above average in baby sales per store on a sales basis, but not necessarily in terms of items carried. In fact, quadrant 4 has the highest number of UPCs carried per store in baby. So that's kind of interesting that in quadrant 4, which is general merch is declining and total store is declining, they're carrying the most items in baby. It'd be interesting to know, perhaps they're not carrying the right items, perhaps their mix across various categories within baby is out of balance in terms of what their shoppers might be seeking. But it also, though, the flip side is quadrants 1 and 2, as we mentioned, they do show growth in the items carried, whereas the 3 or 4 are showing declines. And so where quadrant 4 is the biggest in terms of items carried, it does show that they're cutting back. So that's just off of this one slide that you can find as you pull down this report for leaders and laggards in the level 1 of baby. So that's the overview of how you access the data, the information available to you at MyGMDCorg, and a brief walkthrough in the annotated reports, which hopefully will be a really good guide for you as you get into the data in terms of understanding the reports. Every measure is explained. There's sample insights or conclusions that are drawn from each level. And these reports, the ones I showed you now were from the level 1 of baby, but as mentioned, you can get into the level 2s, 2 reports, which then have level 3 below them. So these reports supply you the full level of detail that you'd be seeking as you get into analyzing this data. And again, we are very interested in your feedback, and especially as you start to engage with it, how we'd love to know how it's starting to form the conversation around general merch and helping you have win-win experiences between suppliers and retailers and leveraging this new resource. So we'll change gears now a little bit and talk about custom analytics, and specifically scan and panel data for retailer engagement. It's just a few slides that we put together just to say, okay, if I am going to engage with a retailer, how can I do that, and what might the information look like? As we talked about earlier in the presentation about the hierarchy, it's level 1, level 2, level 3. The product dimension is fixed. That's why we want a standard hierarchy, so that we're all speaking in the same language. And we're making full use of the available product detail in the coding. And so it's important to point out that level 3, and there's technical reasons for this, we cannot give you detail below level 3 in terms of brand, in terms of flavor, size, package type, things that you might normally expect Nielsen to be able to deliver. And that was because of the coding that we used, the methodology for coding the hierarchy. And so the detail available to you in the GMDC Nielsen GM hierarchy, the reports that are online, that is the full detail of the hierarchy. But that detail is limited to you in terms of channels. And so on a custom basis, we can apply that to other markets, such as retailers, and we can apply that to other analytics or Nielsen services. So we can detail within our home scan consumer panel services. We can do assortment modeling on it to help understand which categories are over or underdeveloped in terms of assortment from a model perspective, not just on a fair share basis. And a broad bucket of other modeling and analytics. And frankly, we look forward to what questions you have to see if we can help drive value and outcomes for you in the market using this new capability. So let's just look at a few slides. This is pulled one of the Quadrant 1 retailers, and we're not going to name names in the quadrants. That is not something you're going to find on MyGMDC.org, is the list of retailers in each of the quadrants. But pulled up one of them, and you can see in this one, and remember the criteria for level 1, or I'm sorry, for the Quadrant 1 was that they are growing both on a total store sales basis and total GM basis, but GM is outpacing. And so you can see that right here. In terms of total stores growing at 1.3% on a dollar basis. And this is, again, 52 weeks ending October 26th of 2013 versus the prior year. GM for this retailer is growing at 1.7%. And so outpacing the growth just a little bit. Whereas, though, the remaining market, and this is kind of interesting, this is a food retailer, I'll tell you that, because it was all food retailers in the quadrant analysis. The remaining market is, if you think about the market in which that retailer competes, it's all the other stores that would fall within that market. So it excludes the retailer themselves. And the remaining market is declining in both total store and general merch sales. And actually, general merch is doing worse than total store for the remaining market. And so if you think about that from the quadrant analysis, the remaining market would be a Quadrant 4 if you were to classify it that way. Interestingly, this retailer, if you look at the general merch as a share of total store sales, it's only 8.6% versus 11.3% for the remaining market. And so without exploring it in detail, the questions that might raise in my mind would be, perhaps the remaining market is overdeveloped in general merch, and so it's kind of rebalancing. You can poke holes in that pretty easily by saying that the remaining market total store sales are in decline. But it could be that somewhere between 8.6% and 11.3% is around the right number, just as a hypothesis. But as you can tell, though, also because general merch is outpacing total store sales, then that 8.6 is actually growth over a smaller number from the prior year. And I can tell you, the prior number was 8.55 or something like it was. We're talking these growth numbers and the size of general merch. That 0.4 percentage point difference isn't enough to materially grow that share of general merch on a noticeable basis, but it's clearly growing. Now, if we look at that and peel the onion just a little bit in terms of, let's look at that retailer and the remaining market and say, why do we think that retailer is outperforming the market? Well, you can see on this page, these are the top 5 general merch categories within that retailer. So pet, candy, baby, social expressions, and household. And you can see that, sure enough, this retailer is outperforming the market in 4 of those top 5 categories. Household's the smallest of those top 5. Pet and candy by far are the largest, and it's household where this retailer is underperforming. But still, as an overall sort of bellwether, this retailer is clearly doing well where it matters the most. I didn't include it, but the retailer is also doing well in not 4 out of 5 type of numbers, but the majority of the remaining general merch categories, this retailer is also outperforming the rest of the market. So it's doing something right across the board. We can dig in a little further, though. So even where underperforming, and so in this case, household, there are pockets of strength. And so you can see this first row here is total household, and then we're digging down a little bit into household batteries. And so the orange continues to be rest of market, the blue is the retailer, and you can see that they're both declining in battery sales. The retailer is not doing quite as poorly as the rest of the market. Same with cleaning accessories. This retailer is doing a little bit better than remaining market in cleaning accessories. As we go to floor care, and actually the retailer is doing a little bit better in floor care as well, let's dig down a little bit further and say, okay, mops and brooms not doing so well, but quick cleaning, actually the retailer is growing sales in quick cleaning. And so in floor care, this particular retailer is doing something right in a category that frankly it's affecting probably the total household department because they're doing so well in that quick cleaning category. If we look at light bulbs, the retailer is growing sales in light bulbs versus the rest of the market, and we can tell that that's in fluorescent, but also not performing as poorly in incandescent and specialty. And actually, I should tell you, I took a row off of this chart for all other, which would include LED and some of the emerging technologies, because the growth rates are just astronomical on those, 70, 80%. And obviously they ruin the scale for the chart. So I wanted to keep it readable for you. And so it's just interesting as you sort of dig down through the hierarchy to understand the drivers of change. Something else I've seen, and I mentioned this earlier, as you look at some of these different, the various levels, that some of the trends that we see in these general merch categories are pretty extreme, growth and decline. And I think that, you know, I don't have all the answers because again, it's still kind of new looking through this content, but I think that there are changes in trend or fad. Some categories become hot, some become marginalized. In batteries, we know, for example, there's a trend. It's being affected negatively because of all the handheld devices that everybody has that have built-in batteries that are rechargeable. And so disposable batteries are clearly on a challenge trend right now. Same with light bulbs, actually, in terms of the change in technology and getting rid of incandescence. And so there's reason for trend that kind of underlie the categories and what's going on from a consumer point of view. I think that we're going to start to see, as we look closer, that there's big changes in distribution patterns as we start to favor one category or another, or we think about merchandising the store differently. And so I think this data, compared to typical categories that Nielsen might look at in terms of center store food categories that are pretty mature and pretty well known and defined, you don't see big double-digit changes in sales across the categories there on a regular basis. But I think that we need to start thinking about being comfortable with seeing a lot of trend change within and across general merch categories. Now, having said that, this is actually pretty interesting data as we look at this. We ran some, if you've ever worked with Nielsen channel facts, it's a view of trip and shopper data using our home scan panel. And so we ran a couple of reports for parts of the hierarchy. In this case, we're still looking at household in terms of the same detail that we looked at on the prior page. And this is a measure called buyer conversion. And buyer conversion is a pretty telling measure in that it looks at the shoppers who we know are category buyers, but it looks at how they buy that category in a particular retailer. So in this case, for household, where it says 20.4, that means that amongst all the people who are shopping at this retailer who buy household department products somewhere, different retailers, 20.4% of them are buying it at this retailer. And that actually says, it screams opportunity to me. So on the prior page, we know that this is a quadrant 1 retailer. We know that they're growing, but only 20% of household buyers are buying household in this retailer. That says, well, you have 80% of household buyers who are not buying it at your store, but they're in your store. So, why, what's the problem there? How can you convert just 1% of those households or 2% to actually buy the category in your store? And so it does point to huge opportunities. And as we look down through like mops and brooms, only 2% buyer conversion. So 2% of mops and broom buyers who shop in this retailer buy mops and brooms at this retailer. They're buying them somewhere else. And so there's huge opportunity here to try to convert and drive GM sales in the retailer. How important is that? Well, it's a big deal. 1 point of buyer conversion in household, in this case, is equal to $570,000 in annual sales. So that's one GM department in household. If I can increase it from 20.4 to 21.4 conversion, that's over $500,000 in this one department. And again, we know the shoppers are in the store because the conversion rate of 20 means that 80% of the category buyers that are in my store aren't buying. Why can't we convert those? To calculate that, just so you know, 1% times 4.515 million category buyers. So that means in this retailer, they have traffic that represents 4.15 million buyers of the household department. Their average ring is $13.70. So actually, that's a nice ring for within a department. So 1% times 4.15 million buyers times $13.70 is equal to $570,000. Big opportunities. And so, again, we look forward to seeing how everybody who has access to this content is able to drive results off of these opportunities. Last slide in terms of content, and actually I'll give a little bit of a PR. GMDC is publishing a seasonal best practices report. This is content that actually helped feed that report in some ways, but just looking at, are we merchandising categories at the right time of year based on when the highest demand is? And this is kind of interesting because as we look at home, 21% of category sales occur during the 8 weeks ending around Christmas time. So it's holiday seasonal. And that makes a lot of sense when you think about cookware, bakeware, and such. The average 4-week period should be about, if you look at the top of the page, about 7.7% of sales. And so the top 4-week period for home is 11.4%. So it's actually a fairly high index. Are we recognizing that? And are we thinking about joint promotion opportunities between home department sales with, say, baking ingredients or other holiday types of items? And so a lot of information available in the hierarchy of the information that's online. There are seasonality reports as part of the standard report package that's posted out there. And so hopefully this will start to have people thinking more consistently across general merch and asking more questions to drive better outcomes for both suppliers and retailers alike. So just some closing thoughts, and we'll open it to Q&A. First of all, general merchandise is a big business, and this has been published before at various GMDC conferences, but $209 billion on an all outlet basis. Remember, that's the all outlet I defined earlier: food, drug, mass, dollar, Sam's Club, Deca. It's $31 billion in grocery. Those are pretty big numbers. It's also highly variable, as we discussed, based on seasonality, based on changes in underlying trends, structural changes in how it's being merchandised around distribution. What that says to me is that while general merch is complicated, first of all, we've tried to provide some order to it through the GMDC Nielsen hierarchy. It needs attention because small improvements are going to quickly add up, as I showed you on that buyer conversion chart a couple slides back. These opportunities are big and they're worth going after and realizing. So through the work of the GMDC and sponsoring this, we're starting to shine a light on this department. And we do look forward to your participation and your feedback in terms of how you're leveraging these tools to drive win-win outcomes in the marketplace. So that is the prepared content, and hopefully we have some questions.
Yes, thank you, Stuart. Great presentation. We do have a couple questions that came in while you were talking. One of them was asking, great content, love the information that's available here. We're having difficulty finding our category. Do we have any recourse?
Yes. Let me go back. Actually, why don't we go online on and actually try to help answer that question live. So again, MyGMDC.org. Whoops. Now my hyperlink's not working. Here we go. There is a resource online, as I mentioned, that spells out what's in the hierarchy. And so why don't we just pull that up while we're online here. So the GM roadmap, as it's called, and it's a Excel-based document. I believe it's opening. Here we go. And it goes through actually each of the levels. And so we'll just get rid of this bar here. But so total GM reports. And so this is a list of reports, and I walked through 2 of them. But category share, GM market share by channel, et cetera. But then see the tabs on the bottom here. These are all the level 1s. And so, and I guess if you don't know which level 1 your category resides in, that would make it a little bit harder. But in this case, we've got apparel, and then level 2 is apparel, accessories, clothing, foundations, etc. And then level 3 is, so under accessories, we don't have any further detail, but under clothing, we have men's apparel, ladies' apparel, unidentified, we have sleepwear, etc. And then you can also see the various reports that are available online for each one of these. And so hopefully, if you search, for example, you could, in theory, search the whole spreadsheet for keywords in the category in which you compete, and hopefully it'll find that for you. But my guess is you probably have a good sense of which level 1 you're in, and then from there you can search and drill down further in the levels 2 and 3 to find out where you reside. If that doesn't work, call the helpline number on the MyGMDC.org to get the website, or to get the direct help from GMDC on that.
Great, thank you, Stuart. Another question: what about companies that already have Nielsen staff inside their buildings? How are they affected by this new data that GMDC is publishing?
That's a good question, actually. From a Nielsen point of view, I can tell you that we have been creating some internal awareness building programs in place. And so we're trying to make sure that our retailer and manufacturer client service organizations understand the content, what we did to develop the content. And so this will be, I think, what you'll find if you are a Nielsen customer is that you're probably familiar with a service we have called Strategic Planner, which is our syndicated total store database. Strategic Planner has within it certain general merchandise categories, but there's limited UPC coding behind those. One of the big initiatives around the GMDC project was some coding that we did using various reference files available to us, and using other techniques like web scraping to figure out what a UPC is, and then put it into the hierarchy. And what we found, that the GMDC hierarchy actually includes about a 6 times improvement in coverage versus what you would find in Strategic Planner. And so, again, we're trying to make the Nielsen teams aware of what it is. It is very unique, though, in terms of the delivery. It's not going to align with what you've seen historically from Nielsen in all cases, because there is a lot of innovative coding in order to solve a pretty complex problem for this. And so, hopefully that answers the question. And as the Nielsen team, and as you guys learn more, hopefully we can start to push this further and get more value out of it.
Okay, here's another question, Stuart. What is the date range of the 2013 information that's there? And a quick a follow-on question is, when do we plan on updating from 2012 to 2013 data?
Those are good questions. And so the initial database that we built across the hierarchy, again, the ending date is October 26th of last year. And so there are 2 years of data in there, so that's why we have the year ago comparisons. It's also populated with all the 4-week periods that underlie that. And so it's 26 4-week periods, basically covering those 2 years. And so that is data that's available as a reference for the GMDC members, and almost all that data has been used in the pre-formatted reports. For example, there are reports that have to do with seasonality, similar to what I showed you. And actually, we learned something interesting in this, in that the period ending end of October happens to be coincident with the holiday seasonality period. And so the seasonal charts look a little bit odd because they tend to be U-shaped, where the beginning period is during the holidays and the ending period is during the holidays. And so, in answer to the second part of the question is, when do we think we're going to update this? Our plan is actually to deliver the next update. And I should say, the overall plan is to deliver 1 update per year. So it's not going to be updated on a weekly or 4-weekly basis like most Nielsen services. But the next update, we think we're targeting the end of May period, because we're trying to find a non-seasonal period as we can, and so that the standardized reports don't show strange shapes in them just due to what the period ending date was.
Okay. One last question for you, Stuart. Who do we contact if we want to do custom analysis or run any retailer-specific reports?
I would say to start with, and I caveat this by saying we don't have all these processes perfectly grooved, but start with contacting the GMDC, and then they can filter the request over to us. Chances are, in the short term, that request will come directly to me. But then we'll make sure that as we have a more defined process, and even a more defined rate card, we might publish those on the MyGMDC site as well, hopefully in the coming weeks.
Great, great. I think that's all the time we have. And before signing off, I wanted to remind everybody that's joined us today that we've been recording this presentation, and it, along with the 10 previous video casts in the series, are all available to you at gmdcconnect.org. And while you're there, you can also check out the schedule for all of our upcoming video casts as well. And before signing off, a couple big thank yous. One, obviously, to you, Stuart, for what I think is a fantastic jumping off point, a kickstart to anybody that wants to learn more about the new resource available, the GM hierarchy on the GMDC website. And the recorded video of this is going to be a nice reference point, I think, of everybody moving forward. The second big thank you is to Nielsen in general, because of the partnership and collaboration we've had with you and your company over the last couple of years has been tremendous, and has allowed us to make this available to all GMDC members. On behalf of the association, I want to thank Nielsen for that. And with that, I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.